In one of America's most beautiful cities, an ugly crime occurred. It was 1910 in Charleston, South Carolina. A Jewish merchant was murdered, and a black man was accused. Bat Humphreys, a former CBS producer, was fascinated by the story and penned Dead Weight.
The story is about a murder that happened in 1910. It develops from a murder that they sought suspects for several weeks. Because it was purported to be a black on white crime, after a certain period of time, people start getting nervous, and there's pressure, as there is pressure today in a high profile case, to do something. And they had arrested, more than a dozen people and had to release them. And then there was an assault on the victim's widow, a big furor, and these people saw a black man standing in the street, grabbed him, and put him to trial. And that was the way that the story went. Neely Duncan was a young man who had a good job, was about to be married, was educated, and had no reason to commit this crime. He was weeks away from his wedding, and he was actually going to pick up his wedding suit on the day that he was grabbed. So the story is interesting because, if you focus it on a human level of this one young man who had a tremendous sense of grace. He forgave those who prosecuted him. He forgave those who bear false testimony before he was hanged. And that sense of grace in him was one of the reasons why I wanted this story to be told.
Folklore has it that a hurricane worse than Hugo in 1989 tore through Charleston and nearly destroyed it after the hanging. The locals said it was in retribution for the hanging of an innocent man, Neely Duncan, the protagonist of Dead Weight.
But this storm actually did occur shortly after the hanging. And after that storm, people started calling it the Duncan Storm, named after Neely Duncan, the man who was hanged, as retribution on Charleston.
There are reports that Dead Weight will be made into a movie. Coming up next, we'll visit an African-American cemetery, purchased for $1 million and slated for development. It was community outrage and a long and heated court battle that saved the cemetery with some 2,000 graves of African Americans. Ed Lee and Barbara Collier are native Charlestonians and community leaders who fought to preserve this century-old cemetery in Scanlonville. The appearance of the cemetery is consistent with African American graveyards. Markers such as plates and plants were used by freed slaves because they couldn't afford tombstones. It's estimated that the cemetery contains up to 2,000 graves. The cemetery is a tranquil place, over 130 years old, located under moss-draped oaks along Molasses Creek, tucked away from paved roads. One developer decided that he was going to clean up the land as he sailed and viewed the cemetery from a nearby river. He bought the cemetery for $1 million with plans for development. The community was outraged. A long court battle ensued. The court battle was about more than saving a cemetery. It was about the heart of Scanlonville, one of the first African American communities formed in Charleston after the Civil War, created by a former slave who purchased 614 acres in an auction in 1868. Finally, a judge ruled that the cemetery is public domain, a victory for the African American community, just in time for Barbara to bury her father.
Ed Lee, he's the president of our civic club, and I was saying, Ed, this funeral is going to be over at 2:30. I don't know, are we going to make it? Is the cemetery going to be in shape for a large number of people? And you know what he said to me? He said, members of this community are in the cemetery as we speak. And people came in to be sure that it was ready. And when we when that funeral was over and we drove up here, you could get your cars all in any kind of way. And it was just a sight to behold. The tent was up. It was right here. You could walk around. And I thank him and the rest of my family members in this community for it. You know, my brothers and I were just so pleased at what they had done to help us, what they had done for my dad.
So the whole community came out and
They helped.
prepared the
they
site for your dad.
Yeah, they made sure that things were as they should have been for a funeral.
And you can see the water from
Yeah, Daddy used to talk about it. He said, girl, he says, there's a spot in this cemetery. You stand on that spot, you can look out, and the boats pass as they're going from this part of the port to that part of the port. And girl, you know, the boats look like they're flying on the air. And as luck would have it, here Daddy is, and he just got that spot where he can see the boats flying on the air. All right. Yeah, he was a good dad. I'm Daddy's girl, I'm sorry. I'm a Daddy's girl now. I'm sorry.
That's just one small battle that African Americans fought to save their land against enormous adversity. On the next Southern Stories, we'll visit the Great Pt2 River, named after the native Pt2 Indian tribe. It's a river that holds many secrets. Some say ghost. The subject of folklore, the river has seen its day of heinous crimes, including those of one of South Carolina's most prolific serial killers, Pee Wee Gaskins, and the Raymond Carney murders, considered the top story of 1953 by the Associated Press. It was a case that sent shockwaves through the small rural community of Pamplico, and it still stirs controversy and fear in the hearts and minds of residents who still remember the horror of the double murders on the bluff. There were other murders along the river, like the prominent political family, the Bighams, the ghost of the Pt2 River. That's all on the next Southern Stories. Thank you for joining me for Southern Stories. I'm Kathy Andrews.
For a DVD of this program, send a check or money order for $28 to the Southern Film Institute, P.O. Box 2364, North Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, 29598. Show title, Southern Stories, Land Loss.